Well, let's speak to Daniel Levy, former Israeli negotiator. Now, Daniel, you're the president of the non-profit policy institute, the US Middle East Project. Given the grim news that we're hearing about the recovery of these bodies of the 6 hostages from the Han Yunis area, this is putting even more pressure on Benjamin Netanyahu.
I'm not seeing that pressure, Cassia. Grim news indeed. Grim news every day, whether it's mass Palestinian civilian casualties still on a daily basis, whether that's the news that those families have received, whether that's confirmation that the refusal and inability to reach a deal earlier has meant that more of the Israelis being held in Gaza have perished, whether that's the ongoing deterioration in the humanitarian conditions and Palestinians being shunted from one area to another, never a safe zone, even when it's been declared as such, and the unedifying continued spectacle of an American diplomatic leadership and Secretary of State who simply isn't believed or seen as credible by anyone, as you said, Cassia. He is messaging quite differently to how the players are messaging. Now, there are in diplomatic efforts, sometimes there's a need for constructive ambiguity. Sometimes as you're getting something over the hill, you'll be saying one thing that the parties can't themselves quite yet say. Sadly, that's not where we are today. Blinken is not only not a credible mediator, he's not an effective one either. And this isn't a personal thing, although he has handled this appallingly at a personal level, but this is institution-wide. This is the US. So how do we understand this spinning of such an optimistic take, despite the fact that it has very little grounding in reality? And that goes to the rest of your reporting this morning, Cassia, which is this is a lot about the convention in Chicago and the protesters and the need for the administration to say, hey, it's okay, we've got this. This looks positive. Don't disrupt Chicago. And the other thing is to prevent a wider regional. The Americans trying to make sure that Israel can continue its provocative military actions, but that there will not be blowback from Iran, and therefore it's deploying its military assets. And this is also highly risky. That's what's going on. Gaza and the appalling situation in Gaza, the hostages, but also, of course, the tens of thousands of dead Palestinians, the hundreds of thousands of displaced and suffering Palestinians, that is coming in a poor third.
Daniel, but help us to understand, how can the messaging, therefore, be so different between Antony Blinken and Benjamin Netanyahu?
I think you will have to, and they will no doubt find the word salad to be able to offer a meaningless response. But one would have to ask the Americans that. Wishful thinking is not a policy. Spin is not a policy, but it can get you through news cycles. So the BBC and much of the American and other Western media are reporting in optimistic ways that maybe there's a deal being done, because that's what US officialdom is telling them. But I can tell you that in the region, no one is buying it. Your own correspondent, of course, and the way you've said it is to put skepticism on this. But if they can just get through, muddle through Chicago, hopefully muddle through an election season as they see it, and this isn't just about words, but what they're doing is they're saying to the Iranian axis, you are going to undermine this, and using that time in order to place further military assets in the region. So what you have is a US that is trying to make sure that its ally Israel continues to have freedom of operation. Interestingly, the Israeli security establishment is background briefing that Netanyahu is still not giving the kind of mandate to negotiators that could bring a deal. The hostage families in Israel are out briefing that they don't trust the prime minister. One of the people found recovered bodies today, one understands, could have been part of an earlier deal had Netanyahu agreed to it. This is, unfortunately, the result of the Israeli system being treated with an impunity, not being held accountable to what it's doing, because, of course, Hamas should not be holding these Israeli civilians. That's a crime. Israel should not be conducting the actions which have led to arrest warrant request at the International Criminal Court, have led to urgent measures being called for by the International Court of Justice because of plausible genocide. None of these things should be happening.
Understood.
But Prime Minister Netanyahu is able to carry on because the US runs cover. And indeed, the US is about to, it seems, place the blame again at Hamas's door when that does not accord with the facts.
Daniel, it's a bleak note on which to end, but we are out of time. Daniel Levy from the US Middle East Project, thank you so much. Of course, we'll come back to this story around the world and across the UK. This is BBC News.